Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Leadership Untitled Podcast, the show that brings together experts in the world of leadership and/or L&D and shares their insights and experiences and also mistakes to avoid you guys making the same ones and hopefully improving your own performance. My guests this week are Adam Kara Jo Wright from Coaching Culture Ltd. Adam is founder and CEO, while Jo is director of the Coaching Culture community, as well as editor of the Coaching Culture magazine and presenter of the Coaching Culture podcast. Their message is a pretty simple one. Having a coaching culture in your organisation where leaders adopt a coaching style is the way forward. To quote their homepage, there seems to be something in the air, a sense that coaching is about to have its day. Well, I guess that means that a great conversation is also in the air. So let me welcome Adam and Jo to the Leadership Untitled podcast. So hi, Adam, Jo. Thanks for coming along today to the Leadership Untitled podcast. How are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, we're figuring out who speaks first. Adam and Jo. We'll go with Adam and then Jo.
We'll go with Adam and Jo.
Adam first, then Jo.
Everything's alphabetical order from now on in.
Yeah. I'm very good. I'll tell you why, because I've put a shirt on for this. It's probably the first time I've dressed up smart in about 9 months, so it's quite nice.
So the guys watching on YouTube are getting a real treat.
Yeah.
I must admit, when Adam and I chatted earlier, I was like, whoa, you've got a shirt on. I kind of instantly felt guilty about not, having some sort of smart corporate dress on, but there we go.
Well, you're looking very smart, Jo. I mean, I feel undressed now. I should have had the shirt on and the full suit works or something like that.
All good, but probably getting ready for being released back out into the wild, I think.
Yeah, I think that kind of time's coming. Thanks for joining today. I mean, the big reason for asking you guys to come today is that, well, there's a couple of things. Obviously, I've talked to you guys before and I know what you do well. I've met you a few times. But I think what you guys are going after really is crucial to the future of leadership. And, I think it was always crucial. And I think there were certain people in organizations who were coming around to that way of thinking, but never really got far enough with it. And I think that what we're going through at the minute in terms of like lockdown, time of recording, we're kind of in the middle of February, so we're still in that lockdown period, and it's doing nothing more than accelerating the need, I think, for what you guys are really pushing out there. So I guess in the interest of the guys that are listening to this, do you want to give us an overview of what coaching culture is actually doing? What's the kind of vision and mission behind that for you guys?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess from a vision point of view, it's not the most grandest of visions. It's, we want to be the one-stop shop for creating a coaching culture. That's kind of, I guess, the purpose of the organization. But above that, Jo and I kind of a few years ago got together and put in the world of organizational development to rights and saying, how do you really create sustainable behavior change? And training doesn't always cut it, certainly not e-learning, tick a box, sheep dipping type stuff. And then just saying, well, coaching really does do that. Coaching really does create sustainable behavior change, but it's criminal that it's reserved for the execs and the select few. So we were just really trying to think of how can we get coaching to the masses, get coaching thought about more, talked about more, and understood more. So from a grander vision, I guess, we want to get people using coaching, creating a coaching culture and understanding that and believing in it and doing it. From a kind of business organization point of view, we want to be those go-to people, first people you think of for creating coach culture, provide a community with we have a free magazine and events and podcasts and stuff, but and bring together like-minded people, share best practice. But secondly, we want to create the solutions that make that easy. So I think that's probably the gist of it, unless Jo adds anything else, maybe.
No, I think we're absolutely on the same page there, Adam.
That's good.
It's always a relief.
It is always a relief. No, that's it. In a nutshell, I think realizing that coaching is the silver bullet that makes the difference, in growing capability, helping people to be the best they can be, growing performance, all the great stuff. And I think for too long, Adam and I, when we got chatting all those years ago, recognizing that for too long, organizations are purely focused on knowledge and skills, and actually mindset and behaviors are the things that really can, knowledge and skills are relatively easy to acquire, whereas the mindset and behaviors are tougher to tap into, and it's coaching conversations that do it. So we're on a winner.
No, exactly that. I mean, coaching is so important to me. It's one of the, probably alongside leadership itself, one of the main 2 or 3 epiphanies in my career. I can remember that I went on a leadership development program in my time when I was at Sky, and part of that was a 6-month coaching program. So it's kind of a couple of days in the training room, and then 6 months worth of kind of observations and feedback, and then progression, all that sort of stuff. So I started it off thinking, I'm quite looking forward to the coaching module, until I was fed back on the first observation that what I was doing was nowhere near coaching at all, even though I thought it was. It was all just kind of like, and I think this is the trap that a lot of leaders fall into, and I include L&D leaders and HR leaders in this. It was just a performance review. And then the real performance review that you had every 6 months didn't really tie anything into those one every month or every week or every 2 weeks little performance conversations of the stats. What have you done? Have you done what you've said you've done? And they always felt like they were just expanded out a little bit with a little bit of natural talk at the start and the end. Just, how are you? No, very good. Thank you very much. So on the back of that, for me, coaching became really important. Really important. I saw it as it's the way to unlock the potential in guys and motivate your team. But I think linking it to the L&D world that I've worked in, I see it as the real key in embedding the things that we're trying to achieve in the organization, and the actual then linking it to the results and the performance of how the organization itself goes. Now, the interesting thing is for me about what you guys do, and I've seen you talk about, is the difference between learning culture and coaching culture. Now, obviously, coaching culture is where you're at. It's the name of the company. It's on the flag, as it were. So many people still, and especially over the last 10 years or so, have put learning culture at the front of what they're trying to build. Do you guys see a difference in those two things? And if so, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the sort of learning and training world. I guess we would have called it training back then, and as opposed to sort of learning. And I think that, I've spent so long talking to people about how they're trying to create a learning culture, and like that's what they're striving for. And I don't think coaching culture is at odds with learning culture. They're all kind of under this banner of development culture, if you like. It's just, there's no denying that the world has changed, that, it wasn't that long ago that the internet didn't exist. You didn't have access to the entire world's knowledge at your fingertips. YouTube with video on demand didn't exist, social media didn't exist, mobile phones didn't exist. There's no denying that the world has changed. And I think that the last 20, 30, 40 years even of talking about learning culture, it's changed in its relevance. That's kind of, I think, I'm not saying that we've had it wrong. I'm not saying that you're wrong if you think learning culture is something worth striving for. What I think that the point should be is that, organizations are at different points along the curve. The nature of, if you're somewhere where it's low skilled workers, high turnover of staff, then, that's going to affect the attitude of people joining that workforce. And should they be on this crazy learning journey versus, a high caliber, knowledge-based industry, they'll all have, one end of the spectrum where striving for development is only has so much impact and return versus another one where it's absolutely everything to them. And I just think like the learning is, access to learning content used to be kind of a bit of a challenge. That was the scarce resource, and actually being able to get access to expertise and learn. And it just doesn't really seem to me to be the case these days. It's so accessible. If anything, you're overloaded with it, and actually the skill is to curate it and actually get more, targeted and boil it down. And I just think if we go really back to what did we really want out of a learning culture, I think we could summarize it by saying, we wanted people to have a growth mindset. That's really what we wanted. And if I was to say to you now, how would you get somebody to have a growth mindset? Would you overload them with learning content, or would you coach them? So I just think that like coaching, the natural outcome of that is the fallout of creating a coaching culture is to have a learning culture. I think it's kind of like a learning culture is just part of a coaching culture rather than, we've maybe been trying to achieve a learning culture. And I've spoken to so many people, they all seem to say similar thing, like, oh, we hope to have one, we don't have one here, we're trying. And I just wonder, what have we been getting wrong for so long? And maybe the answer is it was coaching is the answer. And learning culture happens kind of organically, naturally out of the fact that you've helped create growth mindset, unlock people's potentials, and having those conversations. So again, I just don't think they're at odds with each other. And I think sometimes I might have got people's back up a bit when I say, like, you know, learning culture is dead, the future's coaching culture. And I'm doing it to kind of be a bit provocative in that sense. But my real opinion is that the world's changed, the world's evolved, and so should our approach to development culture. And I think coaching should be the kind of primary focus. Learning culture will happen naturally and be effortless, rather than why is everyone trying so hard and not achieving it? That's my question to them, really. If it's not working, what should you be doing differently? And I know I'm repeating myself now, but just that simple process of, if you want people to have a growth mindset, is it learning content? Is it access to learning, or is it coaching? And that's probably the question to reflect on.
Yeah, well, there's a I was about to say there's a shop where I live in Congleton called B&M, but there's one of them most places. It used to be a Woolworths, and I kind of say the same thing about training and learning, is that we're trying to change the name overnight to learning to try and be a bit more forward thinking. And, you know, one day Woolworths wasn't there, and the next day it was B&M, but it sold the same things. It had the same people working in it. It had the same people delivering stuff to it. It was no different. And I just kind of think, from my point of view, one of the big things I learned when I was going through that program at Sky and since was coaching's a far more natural way of developing and moving forward and growing within yourself and within an organization. And one of the key comparisons I always make is, like, leadership is very much like parenting. And if there's an issue at home, or there's an opportunity at home, what I don't do is I don't stand at the front of the living room with a flip chart and take the kids through a set of content about something. What I'm more likely to do is sit down, ask them some questions, and have a chat with them. And then it gets its basic form. That is coaching rather than training or learning. And you know, I think I've been quite vocal on learning culture as well. That I think that learning, I say quite regularly, is like breathing. That it's happening all the way through the organization anyway. And your choice is what it is you're breathing in, whether it's good for you, whether it's toxic, all that sort of stuff. Because all the bad habits that people fall into, all the back doors and the shortcuts or whatever it might be, they're all learned. It's the rails and the guides of that coaching culture, that leadership support that are missing on that. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I probably would get a flip chart out and start presenting to my kids. Poor
kids. Do you ask them for a feedback form at the end as well?
Totally. Well, no, I'm not interested. No. I think a couple of things, and then it'll probably segue quite nicely into something I think that, you know, I have to know to talk about, because, you know, what you're saying there with learning kind of happening organically all the time, it's kind of like, you know, it's not, we've all gone through this realization that there's such a thing as formal learning and the informal learning, and maybe we've been too focused on what happens in the classroom as opposed to being surrounded by your peers and colleagues, asking them on the job through your own failures and learning through practice and experience. And we're sort of saying the same thing, that right now people think of as coaching as maybe being the formal accredited coach with the exec, and they're having like this conversations session, as opposed to coaching is happening all the time, every day. You probably just don't call it coaching, and actually it's probably not very good. You know, all these conversations are naturally, organically happening. They are coaching opportunities. And I suppose maybe we probably should have clarified that a minute ago when we talked about what's learning culture versus coaching culture. I guess that's kind of what we mean by what even is a coaching culture. It's something that permeates the whole organization at all times. We're not advocates to say, you know, flood the place with exec coaches and everybody has more coaching and more time off the tools and stuff. You know, there's a place for exec and formal qualified coaching, but it's equally managers and leaders having the ability to have coaching conversations, everybody having the ability to have peer-to-peer support conversations and mentors and cross-organization functions like that. So I suppose it's worthwhile, like say, I'll probably talk to Joe. It's more Joe's area to talk about, you know, coaching as a style and things like that. But I think that plays into what you were saying about, you know, I always find it interesting that Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you pick it up thinking it's a management book, and it's not. You know, it talks about parenting, it talks about relationships with your spouse and with other people and stuff. And you're right, work is just relationships, and, you know, how you would approach a relationship, you know, you've got good, strong trust and all those things, as opposed to getting out a flip chart and presenting, here's what you're doing wrong and here's what I want you to do. Yeah. So it is about a style, and just playing back to what I was saying before about, I think the world's moved on, and we can't deny that, is that people have been educated in a different way, parented in a different way, and they expect to be managed and developed in a different way when they join the workforce. And that's, again, another case for coaching over this learning. You know, it's changed. And like I say, it's probably a good place for Joe to jump in with this whole coaching style, as opposed to, you know, what we were maybe talking about a minute ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of, I mean, Rob, you know our thoughts on it as a coaching style versus leaders and managers, you know, becoming a coach, and you know, can they adopt a coaching style more of the time, which is exactly what Adam was just saying about having those conversations. Now, I always say the words day in, day out. It is habit, but I do mean day in and day out. Adam always laughs at my day in and day out, but it's exactly, that's culture, isn't it? It's happening day in and day out.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I'm, you know, with the team at Coaching Culture, desperate to get the message out there that, to get rid of some of the myths that maybe leaders and managers have got about coaching, that it's not this thing that happens over there in a secret room somewhere, that actually they can have conversations in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, even in the moment conversations that take somebody from A to B to move themselves forward. And you know, how they can build it up as a habit, and it's not extra to their work. They're having conversations anyway. Make more of them a coaching style conversation, and it is about style, as opposed to go and get yourself a big accreditation and, you know, take on the profession. This is about a style. Using, you know, coaching as a style more often will help develop the leaders and help develop their people who are working with them. So, and people say, oh, is it possible? Can they do that? Why aren't they doing it? And I think it's because there's these myths that it takes time. I haven't got the capability. Actually, it's for somebody else to do. That's the role of HR. That's the role of the external coach. There's so many things that leaders and managers are kind of putting barriers up, and they're limiting beliefs, and they're getting in the way of actually unlocking their own potential and the potential of their team. And I think as soon as they start realizing that this isn't rocket science, it's not a dark art, this is actually about improving the quality of your conversations more often, more of the time, and the power that has, the difference it can make. And it's how it becomes a habit, making it a habit.
I'd say something that I often think about with this is that if I think back to the best managers I've had, they were using a coaching style. I just didn't label it like that. I didn't have the concepts to call it that. Yep. Whereas, you know, same with the best teachers, the ones who got the most out of me, they weren't the ones who were getting the best results because they were telling everyone what to do. They were the ones that really sort of took the time to help me and develop me and grow. And, you know, we all instinctively, intuitively know that actually the best managers and leaders are the ones who have a coaching style. But what I don't think we've made a good enough effort to is like, how do we bottle that and how do we replicate that across more people? And that's, I guess, what I think the awakening is right now. When we Googled coaching culture 4 years ago, nothing came up. We see other people talking about it now as though, like, you know, it's independent of us. There is a zeitgeist going on. There is sort of this awakening, realization in multiple places. So, like I said, I think everyone's aware. And we might be preaching to the converted here on this podcast as well. And it might be worthwhile getting into like, what do you actually do about it? Why, you know?
Well, I think it's an interesting couple of things you said there, because I think, you know, there is everywhere that I've worked, it's dead easy to kind of point the finger at the likes of L&D and HR and go, why aren't we doing this? But everywhere I've worked, there's been a certain number of those teams or a certain number of people within those teams who are thinking in this way. And they've wanted to do it, but for some reason, the status quo hits back and things don't quite go that way. And one of the things I've seen is really interesting, the word you used there, which was labels, is that these do have kind of labels or reputations that go alongside them. I think I use feedback as another one that's very, very similar. And the places I've worked, I've become quite notorious for kind of natural language campaigns. Which in itself doesn't seem very natural to say, but anyway, I didn't give it that label, honestly.
I'm totally with you.
I'm just kind of thinking the coach, though, it's like I'm not using coaching. I'm not coaching at home. I'm not giving my son or my daughter feedback on, oh, man, Christ, if I said to my wife, I want to sit down and give you some feedback in a coaching session, I think the last I'd see in this office, I'd be, and rightly so, absolutely so. So I can remember one guy, my time at Sky again, and he was doing a big, I can't remember his name right now. He was doing a big seminar with loads of people in the room. And he got them to shout out the words as they appeared on the board. Remember, it's a big contact center environment that I was part of there. And, there was things like people, and it was things like bonus or target and revenue. So positive words that go around the call center. And then the last one was coaching. And it's like the sort of noise was rising up. Once he got to coaching, we went, coaching. Because I think in those environments, it was very much, all right, if my boss is asking me to go into a coaching session, I'm in trouble.
What am I doing wrong?
Something's wrong here. So to what sort of degree do you think that plays a role in people, or a barrier in it not becoming part of the culture? And what else is stopping it?
I totally agree. I think that's one of the myths, that actually your coaching is for those who are underperforming, or on the other extreme of it's reserved for a privileged few who are going from good to great, and actually it works for all situations to improve and help people develop. So I think it's back to the getting rid of some of these myths. And I think the more we all raise awareness of what it is and the benefits of it versus what it isn't, and get rid of some of these myths, because I think they're getting in the way. They are getting in the way. And I've had so many conversations, Rob, with different people in our community, exactly to the point you've just said, and kind of coachings for people who are, oh, come here, the curly finger sort of thing, I need to give you some feedback. Let's have a coaching
can we just have a word?
Yeah, exactly.
Just have a word.
Exactly. And as opposed to making coaching part of that daily habit of, and being expected and respected, that actually if somebody's giving me some feedback, they're coming from a positive place and they want me to help and develop and grow, as opposed to batter my confidence and leave me feeling, rubbish. Yeah. Sorry, Adam, you were also going to add a point to that.
No, well, I agree with everything you said, but I know that you got down a different directions, because I love, I same as you, Rob, with the language. I think it creates our reality. Words matter, and changing words can change people's perception, and totally get what you're saying. I think that, just to add to what Joe said, that it is the privileged, or it is the being told off. But I think in the wider world that we've got a perception of life coaching, and then not everybody even knows what we mean in terms of organization and performance, and bringing out the potential and changing your beliefs. People might think of it as being kind of a bit lost and all kinds. But so I think we spend a bit of time, and not enough. I think we could do more of this, but we spend time with our sort of customers and people who are part of the community, teaching them about how to think like a marketer. And it is essentially rebranding coaching in the organization. That's essentially what it is. And in some cases, coaching has got such a bad reputation and the connotations that go with it, that just pick another term, just call it something different. And if you want to call it some strategic leadership style, and just don't even tell them it's coaching. If that's what you have to do, then maybe that's what you have to do. But it is, I think, a rebranding exercise, and I think you should choose these labels carefully to create that perception. I was talking to somebody yesterday, similar thing. You've got to treat it like a campaign. You can do all kinds to create these advocates, champions, role models, and you've got to get the senior leadership bought in and get them showing their support for it, making budgets available. If time's squeezed, it's not coaching that's the first thing to go off. So there's many tactical things you can do to solve that problem, what you're saying, but somebody somewhere has to have the vision and really want that, and the desire to drive it through. It comes from somebody wanting to make that change. I believe. I think it's a
good point. Sorry, Joe, you're gonna.
I was just going to say, and I think it's also about letting people know that it's not about all coaching or no coaching. It's about situational leadership of coaching. It's about knowing when to coach and how to coach. That's the skill, as opposed to, I don't know, I've certainly had a line manager who coached me to death, and I used to cringe and wince because I was like, here I go, I'm being interrogated. It's about how do you have that natural coaching style of a conversation, because there's always going to be times where somebody needs direction. I always remember this is one of the wince moments where one of my line managers, it was first day in my role, so think about it from a situational leadership, I absolutely needed direction, and he said, so what do you think your objectives need to be? And I was thinking, I don't really even know what the role is fully. And it was like, great coaching question. If you'd have asked me that maybe 3 or 4 months down the line, don't ask me on day one. I need you to tell me and then let me grow and develop me into the role. So I think we need people to appreciate that we're not, on some sort of coaching culture soapbox of it's every conversation is always a coaching conversation. It's absolutely about knowing how and when. And giving people that appreciation that it's part of a broader leadership style, but there are other leadership styles that they've all got the place. But actually, how can you, the coaching style of leadership does have better results when used more often and more of the time. So let's keep getting the right messages out there of what people should be tapping into.
I think it's good. I think something worth drilling down a little bit more into, that kind of difference between coaching and the coaching style, because that's really is one of the big reasons. I mean, I know I met you two guys back when I was working at Talk briefly, but one of the I think the main reason I started following, I think it was yourself, Joe, one of your posts on LinkedIn that really caught my attention a year or so ago, or maybe longer than that now, was around that coaching style versus coaching. And coming back to what you're saying as well, Adam, that so terms and the actual kind of phrases we use around it. I look at something like 70-20-10, and the company's called 70-20-10, and the book's called 70-20-10, and everywhere it's mentioned it's 70-20-10 Institute. But if you actually listen to Charles Jennings speak, he says you call it what you want, and most people do call it what they want. That's just the name of the kind of model, the framework that we built. Call it something completely different, because otherwise you might start all day arguing about the 70 and the 20 and the 10.
Yeah, great.
And the same for you guys. You might get arguing about what coaching actually is and what problems we've had with coaching in the past. Well, it's actually in its most simple, guys. It's just knowing when and where to have nice, natural, great conversations. So
I can take that in another direction too with us. Like Joe said, we're not on this coaching culture soapbox, because I don't think many people wake up and go, we need a coaching culture. They want more innovation, more creativity. They want what the other objectives are of the organization. And just hear it out. If you want more creativity, more collaboration, or more innovation, like, how are you going to achieve that? Throw learning content at them, or make more workshops available, or what? No, you're going to coach them. So what we're kind of saying is, like, coaching is the culture that can create all cultures. It's shaping hearts and minds and thoughts, feelings, and coaching's going to do that. So I don't know, pick a company right now going through a tough time with COVID. They're going to say we need greater resilience, we need greater emotional intelligence from our managers. That's coaching, isn't it? So we're not saying the be all and end all is to achieve coaching culture. We're saying this is the platform and foundation on which you can achieve the things that's going to drive forward the business. And ultimately, I know your passion for actually making this relate to performance and results. And that's again, we're not saying that coaching is the end. It's the means to the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love us having these conversations, because you can imagine in our office, Adam and I have these conversations all the time, and have some colourful conversations around it all. But
bring the colour, Joe. Say what you really think. Go for it.
No, it's Adam who brings the colour.
Right, okay.
Learning styles.
Learning styles blows us right up.
I think I know where Joe's coming from with that, because we talk about this informally all day, every day, and it's nice to actually hear it so bottled down into the real sound bites that, this is the message. We kind of realized that, yes, we've produced 10 issues of our magazine, all telling people what a coaching culture is, why you should have one, how to achieve it. And somebody just said to us, like, have you got like a one paragraph on what a coaching culture is? We're like, no, we haven't. and it's quite nice to kind of like say, like, Joe and I talking about it in this way, where somebody's actually just asking us straight up, well, what is it? And it's quite nice to hear it like this, actually.
boiled down.
Yeah.
You're boiling down 4 years worth of conversations into.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the thing. I mean, joking aside, I think that's part. I mean, I've got a big L&D background, as you guys know, and I think that's part of the issue within L&D teams and departments is that I think naturally something inside them, and I think it is quite subliminal sometimes, is that we've put too much work into this for it to be that simple. And if it is that simple, maybe we're not needed.
Well, I was there in the early days of e-learning where the tutors were saying, you know, we're always going to be needed. People want face-to-face, and they resisted it. And the e-learning guys were saying, this is going to replace all your trainers and save you loads of money, and people will do this. And it's like, you know, it became this really sensible, beautiful approach of blended. And it's, you know, let's use face-to-face for what it's best for. Let's use digital for what it's best for. And like coaching needs to be the same. It's like, you know, don't resist this. This is the way things are going. You should embrace it and just cut to the bit where, you know, it makes you stay relevant. I kind of do this all the time, saying like, you know, L&D won't be as relevant. You know, so I think coaching is the key. That's the bit that they're not going to be able to replace as easily. And if you want to have value, have relevance, I think that it's embrace coaching. But as I said, different organizations, different point on the curve, different reasons for adopting it or not adopting it. It's a spectrum. And I'm not saying we have to convince the world. Those that are on board with this, I think what Joe and I found was there wasn't really anybody really sharing these thoughts, feelings, and a kind of central place bringing these ideas together. And that's what I think we've done, is just trying to be a voice of what everybody's thinking. And when people say that to us, like, you yourself, it's kind of a, you know, where have you been all my life? This is what I've been saying and thinking, and finally somebody's sort of giving it a real voice.
And we speak to people all the time in our coaching culture community and listen to what, you know, the challenges are. I think we've created this, but we're also now in such a privileged position of being able to speak to so many people and get their thoughts and ideas and concerns and challenges. And there's so many similar themes that come through. But the one thing that does come through is the movement towards a coaching culture. And like Adam said before, you know, it's the means to an end of building so much in an organization, whether it's that resilience, performance, well-being, capability. It's the answer. It is the silver bullet. And, you know, we've always said there is no silver bullet. Well, I actually think there is. And it's this, and it's unlocking it. And the great news is more organizations are really starting to buy this, and we've had people say to us, we wish we had been working with you before the pandemic. The pandemic has made us realize more than ever that we need this, and we should have been on this journey beforehand. We really need this now. And you know, the remote working, you know, you can't be sat there micromanaging somebody. You're having to trust, you're having to empower, you're going to have to support with well-being conversations, resilience. And I know the word performance seems to have been a bit more controversial in the last year, because obviously the slant has very much, or the theme has definitely changed to, you know, performance has not been the message. It's been well-being, it's resilience, but it's also been about support, care, authenticity, being open, opening your arms to people into your home. Coaching's allowed all of that. And the best leaders and managers are the ones who are doing that. And the ones who aren't will be the organizations who fall behind, you know, post-pandemic. You know, they're the ones who, you know, people have really either built trust. We've just done a trust survey and we continue to do it. You know, organizations who've built more trust throughout the pandemic versus those who haven't. Fascinating topic. But I know that those with more of a coaching culture, or are building a coaching culture, or leaders and managers who are having coaching conversations, are the ones who are winning. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Absolutely. I was having a conversation about trust the other day, and it's I think the accelerant that this pandemic has been. It's put people in a position where they've had to choose to trust or not. It's not been an option anymore. And it never really should have been just a choice or an option, really. But people having to work from home. I'm now making a decision. Well, I either trust them to do that or I don't trust them to do that. So it's really become polarized and extreme to one way or another. And I guess one opinion I've got is that I've said this on previous episodes as well, so I'm not going to go into the full detail. But I've used kind of football teams as examples, but I'm sure there's many other examples of saying, you know, this isn't the only way to perform. There are. You look like the model that Chelsea Football Club have got, as opposed to Liverpool Football Club. There is a human cost associated with the way that Chelsea do it. It's spend, achieve. And if you don't achieve, you're out. And it's all very quick. But you can't, without looking into that culture, you can't actually take away from the fact they've actually achieved a lot over the last 15 years. Whereas Liverpool, for example, over more recent years have been quite the opposite. We actually want to take the people with us. We want to create the connection. So you've got to make the choice. Do you want the human cost associated with that performance and eventually burnout and attrition and all those things? Or do you want to do it the way that we're doing it? And that leadership culture that you're talking about, I can remember at Sky there was an induction, a trial that we did. I actually did go around the estate, but they had a number of challenges associated with it. So it'd be interesting on your take on it and what other things get in the way, because what I brought in was a sales retention induction. And on the first day, I made it so they didn't actually meet the trainer. It was completely different. And this was gauged on what it is that the leaders actually wanted, or the directors of that department wanted. They wanted it to be different. They wanted it to be real and wow and all these things. So the first day, they exclusively spent in their induction with their leaders, the ones that were going to be leading them in that department, the senior figureheads of that department, staff who were already working within there. They were listening to calls live in the environments that they'd be taking those calls. They were listening to real customers and real conversations. And at the end of the day, they would come back into that training environment, that room, and they would talk and share those great things and those bad things, the real good and the bad and the ugly of what the job actually was. And one of the key reasons for that was that most people, or quite a lot of people, I think it was around about 25% of those people would normally leave within the first 6 months because the job was just far more exhausting, mentally, physically, emotionally, everything than they thought it was going to be. Whereas at the end of day one, people knew what they wanted to learn and how they needed to learn it to get to that point. They knew the job. But as we got towards probably 6 months in, it started creaking for a number of different reasons. So I guess I'll kind of come back to it if we need to, but in terms of coaching and group coaching, as I call it sometimes, so many leaders and so many organizations have given instruction on courses and put leaders on courses such as coaching for performance or how to coach your team. What is it that keeps getting in the way of that way of doing it? What other factors are there, and what things do you find as challenges when you're actually trying to deploy this in the real world?
Is that one for me, Adam? Or
I'd say so.
What's getting in the way of leaders?
Of the actual coaching being in there, yeah, actually going ahead and leading in this different way.
I think it's because, if we're just going to put people on courses, we've got to expect they'll have acquired a bit of knowledge and a bit of skills. Coaching is all about mindset and behaviors and tapping into people's thoughts, feelings, and getting them to think for themselves. So I think the knowledge and skills bit is really important. That's the learning culture conversation. It's really important. Yeah. But then it's about building habits. So don't just rock up on a course, rock off and expect behaviors to change. This is about sustainable behavior change. So this is about leaders recognizing the benefits, leaders building a habit, which for me is all about cue, routine, reward. So actually their cue is I'm gonna have a catch up one-to-one with my team member. The routine is I'm going to ask them, I'm going to just try it. I'm going to try a few new questions in here rather than going bang, bang, bang down the task agenda. Mm-hmm. And then the reward is I'm going to start seeing the outcomes of this, because that person is going to go away and do some thinking for themselves. They're going to be more empowered. They'll see the results. Obviously, it doesn't happen in one quick 5-minute session. This all takes time. So why is it not happening? I don't think organizations are focusing enough on changing habits and changing behaviors. And it is about how you build up those. It's about building up the habits and knowing the benefits of coaching. I think
it's the benefits. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and it was a similar story. Our managers are always complaining that they've not got the time, and that their team aren't able to do stuff. And it's like, yes, well, if you were to coach them, develop them, they're able to take on more, you'd have the time. And I think that there is a dip to go through. There is a pain of implementing the new way. And that's probably the barrier for a lot of people, is actually like, okay, I'm going to have to put the effort in to do something different and go through the pain of creating that sort of new way of working. You know, and I can totally get it. I don't think there's any sort of judgment on whether, like, you know, people are stuck in that way. It's hard to change. We all know that. But the only way to really get people to change is showing them the motivation, the why, the benefits to them, and start with, you know, what's in it for me. And with that case there, it's quite easily, you know, we can show you how you will get more time, get more support from your team, more performance again, you know. And I think that that's probably part of the issue, is the actual managers, leaders wanting to do it, number one. Yes, there's some capability stuff, probably the easiest thing to kind of resolve in a way. And then there's the support from the wider organization. Is this kind of accepted as a way of doing things from here? And that's where maybe the kind of board and the exec buy-in into supporting it and rewarding it, recognizing it. I think it, you know, comes back to what I said before. You know, somebody somewhere in the organization has to have the vision to create this and the drive to push it through and change the processes that recognize it, and then all of that. But and again, looping back to another thing that we've said, it very much is rebranding of coaching. It's like selling it, marketing it, the benefits of it, and getting that desire in people to want to try something.
When you say you can, sorry, Joe, go on.
I think there's a fear as well. I think some people take on their first management role expecting to have all the answers. And that's part of the badge now of being manager. You know, I have the answers now. And actually it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to show that I don't have the answers. And actually I kind of hold my hands up and go, well, I don't know, you've got way better answers to this than me. You've got way better ideas. And I think it's recognizing that that's absolutely okay. Not as only is it okay, it's expected that you're, you know, if you're a leader or a manager, you don't have all the answers. You will have some level of knowledge, absolutely. But, you know, your role is to provide and create the right environment for people to thrive. It's not just to feed everybody in a spoon the answers like we may have experienced at school, and that schools are definitely changing and the workplace is changing. So it's recognizing that the styles of leadership have got to change too. And it's okay not to have the answers. It's okay not to know it all. In fact, it's expected.
We're going through that transition internally now. You know, in the early days of starting up a business, it very much is kind of my vision to direct people. This is what we need to do. Whereas, you know, it's outgrowing me now, and I need people to be more empowered, take more ownership of solving problems. And I look around, see people doing great work, better than what I would have done. You know, so like we've gone. That's startup, which is my world, and I love more than anything. You know, it's that getting something. Nothing exists, and all of a sudden now something very real exists. It's magical to see it happen. But yeah, we're very much going through that transition and trying to practice what we preach with the coaching side of things, and we're seeing the benefit of that as well. You know, we've got a very highly engaged team, very hardworking team, and none of it feels forced. It feels totally natural, because we're more like a family pulling together in the same direction. There's no, you know, kind of whipping people to get to work harder. Everybody really is bought into it. So it comes back to that desire and motivation, and, you know, they give it a try, feel the benefit of it. Right, I'm going to get better and repeat it, and seeing the result. And I do believe, again, right back to the beginning, saying that the world has changed. There'll be a lot of people who they're probably seen results from other forms and styles of management and maybe a bit more reluctant to let go of it, as opposed to maybe like newer generations in the workforce, probably a bit more easier to, this is the way we do things. But so, you know, Joe's point about maybe it's, you know, fear and or new managers, the imposter syndrome side of it, it's all what I would say is head shit. You know, it's kind of mindset related stuff. It's coaching solves the coaching issues. Somebody somewhere has to start that, initiate the ball rolling.
I can share an example of one of so we do workshops of training and skills development. And I remember I was sitting on one of those, and a relatively youngish new manager, by about 11 o'clock in the morning, had a real light bulb moment. You can imagine I was sat in the room just like going, yes, this is brilliant. She said, hang on a minute, I'm getting that if I get loads of emails, she said, all the time. I'm drowning in emails. It's always my team asking me loads of questions. I always respond, and then the next email comes in, and it's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
She said, I'm getting the sense if I push this back to them a bit more, they will build their capability. I will free myself up of time, and I grow as well, because I end up being able to spend my time doing more strategic things, different projects, all the great stuff. And my team get to learn and grow as well. And we went, yep. And she went, so actually I'm holding the team back at the minute, aren't I? We were like, yep. And she went, oh my word. She said, and I've been doing it because I thought I was doing the right thing. And it came from a people pleasing driver in herself. And she wanted to help. She wanted to support them. So her view was supporting equals giving the answers, as opposed to giving them the tools and the environment to find the answers themselves. And she, honestly, it was just, and you know, people like us take that sort of thing for granted, but actually there's still a lot of people out there who need to have that light bulb moment.
And it can be uncomfortable as well, because I guess it's that positive reinforcement of helping people, and we're going, thank you, that's brilliant, thank you, you're such a great boss, thank you. Yeah. Whereas it's like, I've come to you for an answer, don't tell me to go and find it myself. That's not good. I guess you've talked about the kind of styles there, and I guess what I want to come back to is that the kind of the targets and the conversations that get in the way of it. Because I mean, and does this happen to you as well, that when we've kind of adopted the role of kind of consultant and business partner in L&D organizations, sometimes it's been a case of, listen, we can't help you achieve what you're going after without you actually changing some other things there. And Adam, I think you mentioned about reviewing your own processes and policies, procedures, all that sort of stuff. As an example, sometimes it might be no amount of coaching or training is going to enable people to improve their performance on those systems, because fundamentally those systems are almost impossible to use. Or alternatively, no amount of coaching is going to alter the behavior to do something this way instead of this way, whilst you're targeted in a way that pushes your behaviors to do it in another way. And leadership, I think, is a good example of that, you know, if I'm targeted as a leader on results rather than my people, then I'm going to give the answers quicker because I want the results quicker to make sure I get my bonus as well as that. So do you guys come up against those sort of problems when you're talking to clients and potential clients?
You know, Jo has her own conversations, I have my own conversations, and we might have different stories to tell, but I just, one that's fresh in my mind, we quite often say things like people plus processes equals performance, and Jo's very much a people person. I'm very much a process person. We make a good team internally for our own sort of way of building the business. But, I do believe processes restrict certain things. They create these sort of parameters on which you can do stuff, and that can be detrimental to the coaching culture process. Mm-hmm. Example of yesterday, it's a sales culture organization. And I'm like, you need to relate this to how it's going to help them make sales, help them grow their revenue, bottom line targets and stuff. And it was a case, I suppose, everyone's just looking at the result. So check-ins aren't getting done. And I said, well, you need to measure check-ins, reward check-ins, have the mechanisms, the processes to identify that's a formal part of the management process. And therefore it's, you can be kind of given correctional feedback on whether you're not doing it or doing it and things like that. So I do think process is a part to play. It's not purely people, conversation skills. It's not purely that. I believe that process is formalizing what a check-in is and a one-to-one is, and having the right prompts, having the right tools to do it. We're not talking about, again, life coaching conversations over there in a room. We're talking about doing your work better. So I believe there's some hard work to do in the thinking time to say, let's design the way we do work differently.
And I think the systemizing and the processes enable some of the conversations as well. So some people, need that structure to encourage them to have those conversations. If it, and I don't mean from a box ticking, but actually I need to capture this conversation. I need to be having my regular one-to-ones, however often they may be done, but I want to be having and actually capturing it. I think a lot of people actually do enjoy that process side. And actually, if it is linking to their KPIs and their targets, you know, to achieve targets is about you've got to have conversations. You might as well. For me, the coaching style of conversation is a sustainable growth conversation. The one that you were describing before about Chelsea, for me, is also a conversation, but it's a quick win. It's a short term. It's a bang, bang, bang. And therefore, it's a revolving door of different leaders or managers or team. The attrition's high. But actually, if you're wanting to build solid foundations for growth, for the future, for performance, for capability, coaching conversations is the sustainable growth way of doing it, as opposed to a quick win today, which could be a quick, I'm going to tell you the answer, move on.
Sustainable and absolutely scalable, because you know, you compare it to what we were talking right at the start of this about learning cultures and content and sessions and all that sort of stuff. So many organizations, again, and you know, I say this every episode, hands up, I've been part of the problem in various places and various guises. We've got learning management systems with 3,000 pieces of content on there and inductions that are running 4 weeks. And those things, as you grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, and they become bigger, become, well, non-scalable. They become a problem in their own right. We can't create new things because we're too busy maintaining the old things. Whereas, you know, natural conversations in its own right is a very scalable thing and extremely sustainable.
It's totally dynamic. To Joe said, the situation, you know, it's totally dynamic. And this is one thing that I remember early days of my management, and I had an annual appraisal coming up with an employee, and I had some feedback for them, and I thought I may as well wait till their appraisal because I won't have anything to discuss in the one-to-one if I don't, you know, if I give them the feedback now. Just realizing how ridiculous that is now, you know, the idea of having continuous feedback, continuous sort of development and conversations, realizing now that would have really eroded trust. The fact that I've been holding on to something for a long time to bring it up, and you know, like you say, I think we've all been part of the problem. Or do you know what? Maybe that was the standard then anyway. The world has changed. It's fine to improve. You know, everything doesn't evolve. So yeah, you know, again, those sorts of systems, an annual appraisal is probably detrimental to the type of culture that we're talking about. And that is what you were saying about the processes, the way we do things here, the way people are actually being targeted on performance in that way. Is that actually beneficial and achieving what the true objectives are? So.
It just reminded me of something that was an absolute classic example of a performance review, and I've got to share it with you just to gauge your reactions to it. I'm going to keep the names out of it and the company out of it, but there was a leader who had a performance review with one of their training team, and she had it, I think it was in a couple of hours' time, and that leader actively encouraged another member of the team to go and give that person some feedback quickly so she could bring it up in the performance review. I'm like, wow. I mean, how uncoaching style is that?
I think some of my best learnings as an early manager years ago, and I am talking lots of years ago, have been through not being in a coaching style that recognised actually the coaching style and the feedback continuous. So there's two critical career moments for me, light bulb moments. One was me thinking I needed to know more than my team member, who was way more experienced than me. I was the leader of the team, but they had more technical experience and knowledge, but me wanting to give all the answers because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And then I just exhausted of all my answers. And then I just asked the question, what would you do? And then he came out with some things that were way better than mine. And I just remember thinking, I probably just wasted about half an hour there. I could have actually asked that question and come out with something way better, the solution, and then collaborating together. But that was a real, you know, if I'd have just said, what are your ideas? He would have just come out with some brilliant things. And the other one is doing what Adam did before, waiting, gathering all this feedback for the annual appraisal, and then delivering it like in some sort of like that. And the person actually saying to me, I'm shocked to the core. And I just remember thinking, oh, that's all my fault. And I put the mirror up to me and thought, never will I do that again. I was giving him feedback from like 4 months ago,
Yeah.
and it's just, and I'll never forget it. And that happened 20 odd years ago, but my goodness, it stuck with me.
Justifying reasons to give scores out that follow the distribution curve. But I thought I was better than that. Well, I can't actually say that you are better than that, but I need to put you into this bracket. But let's have an awkward conversation about it. And yeah, back in December, why didn't you tell me then?
Yeah.
Because you might have improved. And
we've all been there, I think.
I guess bringing it kind of like to bring it right really real towards the end of this, then I think that return on investment is a big thing for me when it comes to learning development, leadership practice, all those sort of things, and equally return on expectation rather than investment sometimes. And I guess for you guys, I'm seeing kind of two things there. Is obviously there's the outlay to get this thing working towards its translation into performance improvement in terms of ROI, but also then there's also how do you measure that part of it? But then secondly, how do you actually go about measuring that the leaders are improving in their coaching style and being able to actually kind of prove that to the people who've paid for the program and invested into it?
Yeah, it is an interesting one that comes up. And I think, we've put some articles in the magazine that kind of try and scientifically measure this and show some real numbers. I'm kind of a marketer by trade, if anything, and actually it's an old adage in marketing. What's the ROI of this campaign, of that campaign? And the adage is 50% of your marketing works, you just don't know which 50% it is. And I think that's always the case with learning interventions, with coaching and things like that it kind of works, but how to really measure it to the nth degree is probably the wrong question to ask in some cases. You can set your parameters and your matrix that you want to measure by. We encourage people to do a survey, create a benchmark, do a program, measure it, and that might be bottom line results, that might be retention, that might be some engagement scores, whatever. There's various ways of measuring it. But then there's various ways people will put a different value on that, and they might decide, that's monetary value is that, versus actually, if you put an exec coach with the CEO and they get the confidence to make an acquisition that triples the business, you could talk in the ROIs in billions of multiples, whereas just getting somebody maybe to feel a little bit better about themselves and whatnot on a daily basis, you might not put money value on that, but you might put an ethical, cultural value on that. So it's a question that I won't say try and avoid it. I just ask people to come up with their own actual expectation. Totally. It's more important. What are they actually wanting to achieve? Can you think of some ways of measuring it? But you know what? Could you measure the alternative? Why are we asking? Can we measure this? Can you measure not doing it? Can you measure what? So it's a tricky one.
I had a fabulous conversation. She's speaking at our conference actually coming up soon with an MD of an organisation, and she talks about how organisations spend too much time measuring the value of every pound spent. She said, I want to be measuring the value in every conversation and moment spent. She said, raising the value in moments with my team, with leaders in my business, and raising the value of the moments they spend with their teams through having the right conversations. We should be measuring that value as well. So it is that sort of, it's a softer metric that will deliver ultimately harder business metrics or the softer ones in, in qualitative feedback forms. But I loved that when she said that, measuring that every moment's counting, every conversation's counting.
Really like that. That world of L&D again that I've been in, and part of the problem again, it is that if you try to measure something that really didn't need to be measured, it does end up actually influencing your behaviors and the way you do things, because now I'm targeting getting great feedback on my sheet at the end of the session, as opposed to actually delivering the value that, we talked about the questions before, that a leader faces. I'm actually maybe going to make someone in my team feel a little bit uncomfortable for a minute by a challenge. Now, if I was to ask for a feedback form there, I felt really uncomfortable and that's on my sheet. Well, that's bad feedback. You made them feel uncomfortable. I don't want that in the future. It can be quite tough to measure that.
It's a huge bugbear for me. I've seen so many, I'm sure you have from the contact center environment, particularly that incentive schemes go wrong because they just create the loopholes for individualism and stuff like that. And we do this in our business. We're smaller, it's easier, but we try and create absolute alignment. Everybody is pulling the same direction. How we get there doesn't always have to be perfect. We're not going to measure things that create the wrong behaviors, like you're saying, but we're all aligned to the same thing. Totally agree with what you're saying.
Well, I think you said right at the start of this, Joe, and I think Adam laughed at you by saying the day in day out thing. I think at the episode I did with David James, he actually said, every company, most companies anyway, if not every single company, invests in platforms for email, for example, but they don't go around looking for return on investment for that. They realize it's a day-to-day thing that they need, and indirectly helps them to perform and do things. Now, insert your own joke about how email's ineffective and is and doesn't help you perform. But then again, you could say that about lots of different systems, even just office programs, that sort of thing. So my kind of opinion is the same on L&D and coaching, is that ultimately it's about getting it to be just a natural everyday activity that those senior leaders and leaders actually just say, well, this is now day to day. It's not about does it in its own right generate something. It's what that allows me to do to be able to generate something.
And I think I'm speaking to a lot more organizations, Rob, now that are talking about coaching is the way we communicate it around here. Brilliant. It's the way we communicate. And I love that. So we talk about labels, demystifying some of that. It's actually how we communicate.
Yeah.
But suddenly it doesn't have that coachy label.
Absolutely.
I think we're saying the same thing, just another way that when you're on a journey, and if at the start of it you're just a few degrees off track, by the end of it you're miles away from the start. Yeah. I think this, coaching is one of those things that kind of like the gift that keeps on giving, in a sense. Like you can measure it in 3 months, but what if you measured it in 3 years? And it's just you can be just much further off track by not taking this approach, and it's difficult to really sort of measure all of those things and boil it back down to, yes, it was the coaching, yes, it was this style of management and leadership, but when you making decisions about where to invest time and effort, there comes a point where it's like it's a no-brainer. It's like I don't need to know the kind of measure and return, like you said with email, or if we adopt Teams or we adopt this, like it just becomes a no-brainer. It's like, how could we do it without? And I think that for many organizations, they recognize, this is a no-brainer. There's some people where we speak to people where there's pockets of advocates trying to create a business case, trying to get buy-in, and there's other organizations, we don't, they're not bought into coaching, and it's not our job to convince the world that coaching is the answer. It's those people that do know that coaching is the answer, and they're looking for better ways of doing it. That's I guess where we're focusing a lot of our attention and pushing an open door in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it ties to one of the things I say quite regularly, that I always say that just because the omelette was bad doesn't mean the egg was. It's getting leaders to realise you can't make the omelette without the egg. So, stick with it, even if it wasn't right the first time. There's lots of other processes that influence that. Brilliant stuff. I guess the last thing we need to do as we kind of draw to a close is that we've had great conversation there. Obviously, the title of the podcast is Leadership Untitled. So what we have to do between the three of us is agree on what we'd like the episode to be called based on the little journey we've been over the last hour or so. Have you guys got any ideas of what that might be?
I'll definitely leave that to Adam. He's the clever marketer amongst us with some cool titles.
You and I, Joe, we will sit back and relax at this moment. Then the mic is all yours.
I'll leave it over to the marketer of the team.
You could at least coach me to do it rather than
just tell you.
But I think I think to be fair, we've covered so many different things. I think it's been packed with value for people listening, and I could either create a title that's probably really, really, really long, or maybe it should just be kind of, I don't know, how to create a coaching culture. And I mean, we sometimes talk about this. We band about a few different phrases which cover things like creating a coaching culture powered by conversations, about creative performance, and underpinned by trust. And we kind of have this, for us, it is about conversations, not coaching, and it is about performance, not just kind of like airy-fairy reasons. And it is about I'd say trust, empathy, and leaders having that style. So I'm probably going to leave it to you, Rob, to do the hard work maybe when we're off air and figure out the actual detail. But there's got to be a title in there which hopefully summarises it quite neatly.
Not batting it back, we're waiting. Go on, Joe.
I think I over-egged Adam's marketing capability there then.
Well, I think that, again, just looking objectively, putting my coaching hat on, the word that kept coming up in what you were saying there was trust.
Yeah.
And I know you've got the event as well coming up as well around that. So I'm thinking, something along the lines in like trusting coaching culture, trusting conversations, trusting something like that. What do you guys think?
Creating
our conference is called Trust Matters. And then I can't remember the next tagline, but it's about effective coaching conversations.
Yeah.
Well, if you're happy that the podcast will have the same title as your event, Trust Matters. Yeah,
why not? Yeah. I think we'd want coaching culture in there somewhere, maybe. But,
I do. We'll have a think. We'll come up with something.
Right,
we've covered everything, haven't we?
We'll put that in there. Great stuff. Now, I guess as the absolute final thing, if guys want to know about more about what you guys do or get in touch with you to engage you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Simple and easiest thing I would say is go to coachingculture.com. It should show you how to join the community. And if you do, it's free. You get constant access to all of our message, content, theories, ideas, and otherwise follow Joe on LinkedIn. That's probably the best thing. So what is it, at Joe Wright Coach?
Something like that, yeah.
I'll put the link in there as well, anyway, for the people on the screen, and also in the comments for the podcast as well. And equally, Joe, you've got the magazine and the podcast. If you want to let people know how they need to get hold of that one.
Well, the magazine is through what Adam just said. So coachingculture.com, you could subscribe to the magazine and get the free resources, which are phenomenal. So you become part of our community and get access to some really quality articles, resources, podcasts, webinars, which is brilliant. So that will be the best. And then you can access Coaching Culture Podcast on, I think we usually say it on wherever you listen to your podcasts, to be fair. So a bit of everywhere.
Wherever you're listening to this one, you should be able to.
Should be able to find it the same way. Brilliant stuff. Well, great. And again, to those listening, I'll put the links in for those things as well, so it's nice and easy for people to branch off and see those straight after listening to this. So, brilliant stuff. I've really enjoyed that converstion. Thank you
likewise.
so much.
I've enjoyed it too.
I love kind of putting the worlds to rights and then realising I was part of the problem all along. So brilliant. Thank you, guys. Have a great day and the best of luck with your event coming up, and hopefully we'll speak soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob. It was great.
Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that brings us to the end of the Leadership Untitled podcast for today. This episode will be called Trust in a Coaching Culture. All that remains is for me to thank Adam and Joe again for joining me today and for giving both myself and you guys some great advice around all things coaching and leadership. Thank you. Also, thank you to you, the listener, again for tuning in and listening all the way through. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you'd like to get in touch with me, then please take a look at www.robmoores.com and obviously drop me an email from that point, or take a look at my LinkedIn page and get in touch via there. Until next time, thank you.